Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong, even when you had earned every right to be there? Imagine standing at the airport gate, holding a valid first-class ticket in your hand, dressed in a suit that tells the world you worked hard to be here. Yet instead of walking through, you're told to step aside. You watch another man, white, wealthy, unquestioned, glide past without a pause, champagne waiting for him. In that moment, what would you do? Would you fight? Would you walk away? Or would you carry the wound silently, as so many before you have? This isn't just a story about one man being humiliated. It's about choice. A choice to either accept the injustice as just the way things are, or to turn humiliation into a force so powerful it shakes an entire industry. As you listen, ask yourself, if this were me, how would I respond, and what kind of change would I hope to see? Stay with us, because this isn't just his story, it could be yours. And before we begin, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. The departure lounge at Los Angeles International Airport hummed with the low static of business travelers, vacationers, and weary families waiting for the late afternoon transcontinental flight to New York. Gate 47 stood out with its glowing display, Flight 228 non-stop to JFK. The first-class line was roped off neatly with chrome poles, already filling with passengers in tailored suits and weekend luxury wear. At precisely 4:15 p.m., Richard Coleman arrived, the moment he stepped into the gate area. Heads turned. At 60, Richard carried himself with the careless confidence of wealth that had been inherited and multiplied. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with slicked-back silver hair that seemed sculpted for magazine covers. His driver wheeled behind him a monogrammed trunk and a polished leather briefcase embossed with gold initials. Mr. Coleman, welcome, the gate agent. Lauren Mitchell greeted him with a bright smile. She scanned his boarding pass in one fluid motion. We've been expecting you. Richard chuckled, slipping his sunglasses into his shirt pocket. First-class service as always. His voice boomed just enough for those around him to hear. Without pause, Lauren directed him through the gate. No questions asked, no second glance. Richard strolled down the jet bridge, the image of effortless privilege, as if the world had been built to accommodate his stride. Just behind him, another man waited in line. Marcus Grant stood quietly, his boarding pass gripped between his fingers, a leather carry-on slung over his shoulder. At 52. Marcus had the calm presence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and weighty decisions, not the chaos of airport terminals. His dark, tailored suit, understated silver cufflinks, and neatly polished shoes reflected meticulous care. Yet, unlike Richard's flashy bravado, Marcus carried himself with stillness, the kind of gravity that drew attention without asking for it. The glowing letters on his boarding pass read, Seat 1A, First Class. He had flown that seat countless times before. Next, please, Lauren called, her cheerful tone shifting slightly when Marcus stepped forward. Her eyes flickered down his frame suit, shoes, neatly trimmed beard, then back to his face. Something tightened in her expression. Marcus offered a polite nod. Good afternoon. He extended the boarding pass. Lauren took it, scanning once, then again, frowning at the screen. I need to check something. Marcus's brows knit. Is there a problem? Her lips tightened. The system is flagging an irregularity. One moment. Sir. She tapped at the keyboard as the line behind him grew. Richard Coleman's figure had already disappeared through the first-class curtain on the plane. Marcus remained at the gate, waiting. The departure board flickered overhead. Boarding all passengers. Yet the gate agent's smile had cooled into suspicion. Mr. Grant. "When did you purchase this ticket?" Lauren asked, turning the boarding pass over as if searching for invisible ink. 3 days ago, Marcus replied evenly. "Through a corporate account. Billing address doesn't match what we have on file," Lauren murmured, shaking her head. "I'll need to verify this." Marcus inhaled slowly, letting the breath out through his nose. He had been here before, not here at LAX exactly, but in countless subtle moments of doubt cast on him at bank counters, at hotel lobbies, even at the entrance of conferences where his name was printed on the keynote banner. He recognized the choreography of suspicion all too well. "May I ask what kind of irregularity the system found?" he asked, his tone measured, professional. "Security protocol," Lauren said vaguely. She gestured to the side. "Please step aside until we clear this." Passengers shuffled past, handing over their passes with ease. Each scan beeped cheerfully, a green light flashing. A family with children, a young white couple in sports jackets, an older businessman all passed through without pause. Marcus remained. Behind him, a woman sipping coffee paused. Olivia Reed, a freelance journalist with an instinct for stories others overlooked, raised an eyebrow. Her phone was already in her hand. Something about the contrast the white VIP waved through. The black man in a tailored suit held back pressed a familiar button in her gut. She switched her phone to video. The lens caught Marcus's calm profile as he waited. Boarding pass still in Lauren's hands. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The line dwindled. Murmurs rose among passengers waiting to board. "Excuse me," Marcus said at last, checking his watch. "The flight board's in less than 15 minutes. Can we expedite this?" Lauren hesitated, then signaled to the supervisor's desk. "Mr. Brooks, could you come over?" Stephen Brooks approached, a heavy-set man with the swagger of 15 years in airport authority. He carried himself like someone accustomed to unquestioned compliance. "Problem, possible fraud," Lauren answered crisply. "System flagged his ticket." Stephen looked Marcus up and down, his gaze settling with an edge of skepticism. "Let me see that." He took the pass, squinting at the letters as though sheer scrutiny might reveal a forgery. Marcus held his posture steady. "I've answered every question. Corporate account, confirmed purchase. My assistant can send verification in minutes." Stephen chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Security doesn't run on your timeline." Olivia zoomed in on Marcus's face. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. But the tension around his jaw, the careful restraint in his eyes, told a different story. Richard Coleman, already sipping champagne in first class, was nowhere to be seen. No one had asked him about billing addresses. No one had scrutinized his documents. The gate area fell quieter, the unspoken awareness hanging in the air. Passengers glanced sideways, some frowning, others avoiding eye contact altogether. Inside, Marcus's thoughts churned. Not again. How many times will dignity come second to suspicion? How many times do I have to prove I belong? He wanted to press the point, to remind them who he was, what authority he carried in the world beyond this gate. But another part of him, calmer, whispered, "Not yet. Not here." Instead, he adjusted his grip on the leather strap of his carry-on and nodded once. "Very well. What do you need from me?" Stephen smirked as though victory had been secured. "We'll let you know." Olivia's phone screen filled with comments. "This is profiling. Where is this happening?" Another black man in a suit? Stopped for what? "This looks wrong." Her follower count began to tick upward. 20 feet away, beyond a curtain Marcus was forbidden to cross. Richard Coleman lifted his glass for another sip of champagne, the bubbles catching the cabin lights. Marcus remained at the gate, his dignity intact, though the sting of humiliation pressed against his ribs like a weight. He had lived long enough to know that sometimes the most powerful answer was patience. Sometimes silence held more force than protest. He straightened, eyes sweeping the gate area, not with anger, but with quiet resolve. This wasn't the first time, but perhaps it would be the last. The hum of the terminal seemed to fade as Marcus Grant stood at the edge of the boarding area, the focus of unwanted attention. The last of the first-class passengers disappeared through the jet bridge. The rope separating privilege from scrutiny remained firmly in place. Lauren Mitchell tapped at her keyboard again, her brows drawn together. The system beeped with finality, as though her suspicions had been confirmed. "Mr. Grant," she said, her voice clipped. "Your payment method still shows irregularities. Corporate account, yes, but the billing address doesn't align. That is a red flag." Marcus kept his tone level. "The account is managed through my company. It's common for billing to route through different subsidiaries. My assistant can confirm this." Lauren glanced at her supervisor. Stephen Brooks leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his expression smug. "We're asking routine questions. Mr. Grant, you seem awfully defensive for someone with nothing to hide." A few passengers lingering in line exchanged uncertain looks. Olivia Reed, standing just within earshot, lifted her phone higher, framing the scene. Her live-stream viewer count ticked upward 50, then 100. Comments scrolled quickly. "He looks professional. Why are they grilling him?" Another, "Would they treat Richard Coleman this way?" Marcus inhaled slowly, the way he did before walking into contentious board meetings. His father's voice came to him, steady and low from decades ago. "Never let them see you break. Keep your calm. Make them wrestle with their own reflection, not your reaction." "May I ask," Marcus said evenly, "what the official procedure is in a case like this? Are all first-class passengers subjected to this level of scrutiny?" Stephen's lips curled into a humorless smile. "We follow the system's guidance. That's all you need to know." Marcus tilted his head, eyes steady. "So Richard Coleman, who boarded just before me, had no issues." The question hung in the air, sharp as glass. Lauren's cheeks flushed, and Stephen's smile faltered for the briefest second. Around them, passengers shifted, the tension unmistakable. Olivia's live stream captured every second. Her audience surged past 300. She whispered into her phone's mic. "The man in the suit, Marcus Grant, has a valid first-class ticket, yet he's being interrogated while others walk right through." Stephen straightened, his voice harder now. "We're not discussing other passengers. We're discussing you." Marcus remained still, though inside, his thoughts twisted. He had felt this same cold pressure before on Wall Street in the 90s, when deals slipped through his fingers for reasons never spoken aloud, and in boardrooms where introductions stalled because no one expected the black man at the table to be the decision-maker. Those memories simmered beneath his calm exterior like coals beneath ash. "I would like this resolved," Marcus said. "The flight departs soon. You'll sit tight," Stephen snapped. "Security doesn't bend to anyone's clock." The words were louder now, pitched just high enough for the surrounding crowd to hear. A mother with 2 children pulled them closer, as if the man in the tailored suit posed a threat. An older businessman shifted uncomfortably, staring at his shoes. But Olivia's live-stream viewers were indignant. This is profiling, plain and simple. Another comment flashed, "Where's this happening? JFK, no LAX. Someone call it out." Marcus felt the weight of every eye, every assumption pressing against him, yet he refused to shrink beneath it. He adjusted his cufflinks, lifted his chin, and met Stephen's glare with silence. Lauren leaned closer to her supervisor, lowering her voice, though it carried in the stillness. "Maybe we should just know." Stephen cut her off. "System flagged it. That's all the justification we need." He tapped the desk with a stubby finger, then looked at Marcus. "You have two options. Take an economy seat or catch the next flight after further verification. Which will it be?" The words landed like stones dropped into deep water. For a heartbeat, Marcus considered revealing himself. He could have said it then. "I am Marcus Grant, CEO of Aero Global Airlines, one of your airport's largest partners. My company practically pays your salary." The declaration sat on the tip of his tongue. He imagined the way Stephen's face would blanch, the way Lauren's hands would shake as they scrambled to apologize. But another thought tugged at him. What if I stay silent? What if I let this play out exactly as they intend, with every witness watching? What might come of that? The silence stretched. The crowd around them grew. Olivia's live stream buzzed at 800 viewers. Finally, Marcus nodded once, his voice calm but firm. "I'll take the economy seat." Lauren blinked, surprised. Stephen smirked, as though he had won some battle. "Good, we'll make the adjustment." Behind her phone, Olivia whispered, "He's stepping down, but not defeated. Look at his eyes." Marcus gathered his carry-on, his posture upright, his dignity unbroken, yet beneath the calm, his mind spun with quiet fury, with the calculation of a man who had spent his life learning when to absorb and when to strike. The decision had been made. For now, patience, but not forever. The boarding gate grew quieter as the last few passengers filed through the jet bridge. Marcus Grant stood still, his carry-on clutched by his side, while Lauren Mitchell tapped on her keyboard and printed a new slip. The sound of the printer spitting out paper was sharp, final, like a gavel striking. "Here," she said, sliding the new boarding pass across the counter. "Seat 27B, economy." The words hung in the air. The seat might as well have been a sentence. Marcus picked it up with steady fingers. He read the numbers without reaction. Only the faint tightening around his jaw betrayed the insult. He had paid for 1A, one of the most coveted seats in the cabin, the kind reserved for executives, politicians, celebrities. And now, because of suspicion wrapped in bureaucratic language, he had been reassigned to the middle of economy. Behind her phone, Olivia Reed whispered, "They just bumped him from first class to coach. And he didn't even protest. This is unbelievable." Her live stream ticked past 1,000 viewers. The comments scrolled faster than she could read. Lawsuit incoming. Pure discrimination. Who is this man? He's too calm for this to be ordinary. Stephen Brooks adjusted his tie, looking satisfied. "You're clear to board now," he said, gesturing toward the economy line. His tone carried no courtesy, only dismissal. Marcus's eyes swept over the gate area one last time. Passengers stared, some openly, others with sidelong glances. A few looked away quickly, ashamed to be caught watching, but no one stepped forward. No one said a word. He nodded once, then walked toward the economy queue. The jet bridge smelled faintly of metal and recycled air. Each step Marcus took echoed with a dull thud. He felt the weight of eyes even here, though most were only in his imagination. Somewhere up ahead, Richard Coleman was likely swirling champagne in his glass, legs stretched comfortably in seat 2A, oblivious to the drama left behind at the gate. The flight attendant at the aircraft door greeted Marcus with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She glanced at his boarding pass, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then waved him through. The walk down the aisle stretched endlessly. Marcus passed row after row of wide leather recliners in first class, passengers already settling in with drinks and magazines. He kept his gaze forward, his stride measured. The curtain separating classes loomed like a symbolic barrier. As he pushed past it into the narrow economy aisle, the atmosphere shifted. The air seemed heavier, the rows tighter. Passengers jostled to stow carry-ons, voices overlapped, Children cried. The smell of reheated food drifted faintly from the galley. Row 27 waited for him, middle seat, between a frail elderly woman knitting with slow, deliberate hands and a college student wearing oversized headphones, tapping furiously on a laptop. "Excuse me," Marcus murmured, his tone soft, courteous, as always. He slid into the narrow space, tucking his carry-on beneath the seat in front, the armrests pressed against his sides. The seatbelt buckle was cool against his fingers as he clipped it shut. The student barely looked up. The older woman offered a small smile. "Traveling for business?" she asked gently. Marcus returned the smile. Something like that. He leaned back, staring at the seat in front of him. The fabric smelled faintly of detergent and time. He had once overseen the design of these very seats, approving dimensions and leather quality. Now he was experiencing them in a way he never had before. Compressed, anonymous, diminished. Olivia's live stream had not ended. She followed him down the aisle discreetly, filming from a distance until the crew gestured for her to put her phone away. The clip of Marcus surrendering his first-class ticket for an economy seat was already circulating online. Within minutes, it would be retweeted, clipped, and debated by strangers across the country. For now. Marcus sat quietly, his hands folded on his lap. On the surface, he was calm. Inside, he felt the slow burn of humiliation spreading through his chest, a familiar ache he had learned to carry. He thought of his children, grown now, but once young enough to ask questions about why Daddy was treated differently. He thought of his mother, who used to say, "Hold your head high. Son, the world will try to shrink you, but you are bigger than their smallness." He closed his eyes briefly, repeating the words like a mantra, somewhere in the front of the plane. Richard Coleman laughed at a joke from the flight attendant. The clink of ice against crystal carried faintly back through the cabin. In seat 27B, Marcus Grant remained still, a man pressed down, but not broken. Outside, in the digital world, the story was no longer confined to Gate 47. It had begun to live a life of its own. Olivia's live stream passed 2,000 viewers before the plane's doors even closed. Screens across the country lit up with his image, a dignified man in a suit, told he didn't belong, forced into a seat he hadn't chosen. The humiliation was complete. But the story was only beginning. The jet bridge groaned as the final passengers boarded. Flight attendants hurried through their pre-departure rituals, securing luggage and calming restless children. In row 27B, Marcus Grant sat silently, his long frame wedged between two strangers. The elderly woman beside him pulled a shawl tighter around her shoulders, while the college student to his right typed frantically, the clacking of keys filling the narrow space. The hum of voices blended into a low drone. Marcus rested his hands on his knees, steady but firm, as if anchoring himself against the invisible tide of humiliation. He could still hear the faint echo of Stephen Brooks's words at the gate. "Take economy or don't fly?" The casual cruelty of it rang louder than the announcement spilling from the overhead speakers. Marcus tilted his head back, closing his eyes briefly. His thoughts slipped backward decades earlier to a cramped dorm room where he first dreamed of building something greater than himself. Back then, he'd survived on vending machine dinners, skipped meals so he could afford textbooks, and taught himself to tune out the sideways glances from professors who doubted his place at the table. He had told himself that one day he would rise so high that no one could question his belonging. Yet here he was, pressed into 27B, his dignity once again subjected to trial. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 228 to New York. Flight time is 5 hours and 12 minutes. The words washed over Marcus. His eyes opened slowly, scanning the cabin. Families wrestled with snack bags. Young professionals scrolled through emails, and a toddler shrieked for a toy dropped beneath the seat. It was ordinary, everyday life. And yet, the weight of injustice made it feel extraordinary, almost surreal. The elderly woman beside him leaned closer. "You don't seem like a man who belongs back here," she whispered kindly, her voice trembling with age, but carrying a quiet certainty. Marcus offered a small smile. "I paid for a different seat, but sometimes life has other plans." Her eyes softened, but she didn't press further. She returned to her knitting, needles clicking softly like a metronome marking time. Marcus pulled his phone discreetly from his pocket. A message notification blinked. He opened it. "Rebecca, Assistant Mr. Grant, everything is ready. If you want verification, I can send it now." He typed quickly. "No. Activate Hale Protocol." He paused for a moment, staring at the words before hitting send. His thumb hovered, then pressed. The message was gone. Marcus slid the phone back into his pocket, his expression calm, almost serene. To the outside world, it looked like he had surrendered. To those who knew him, it was the opposite. It was the beginning of a calculation, a measured response to a system that had underestimated him one time too many. Meanwhile, a few rows behind. Olivia Reed adjusted her seat and pulled out her laptop. Though the crew had stopped her live stream during boarding, she had already uploaded the first clip. Comments and retweets had exploded during the past half hour. The numbers climbed relentlessly, 10,000 views, then 15,000. Her inbox pinged with messages from editors she hadn't heard from in months. "Is this real? Can we license the footage?" Olivia glanced toward Marcus, studying the quiet strength in his posture. She didn't know yet who he was, but instinct told her this was no ordinary passenger. As the plane taxied, Marcus felt the vibration hum through the floor, through the metal frame, up into his shoes. He focused on the rhythm of it, steady and grounding. His thoughts turned inward. Do I let this pass quietly? File a complaint? Sit through endless apologies, watch it vanish into bureaucracy, or do I let the world see, let them feel what I've felt for years, doubt in places where I've more than earned, belonging? The engines roared as the aircraft lifted from the ground, the cabin pressed back into their seats. Marcus inhaled deeply, watching the city lights shrink below. The college student beside him muttered, 5 hours in the middle seat. This sucks. Marcus gave the faintest smile. Perspective makes all the difference. The young man didn't look up, already lost in his screen, but Marcus's words lingered in his own mind. Perspective, yes. This humiliation wasn't just another wound. It was perspective. It was fuel. Somewhere in the front, Richard Coleman was raising another glass, basking in the glow of unearned ease. Marcus, seated in 27B, closed his eyes again. He pictured the faces at the gate, the crowd that had watched in silence. He thought of Olivia's phone raised high, the light blinking as she recorded. This was no longer a private insult. The world was watching now, and Marcus Grant was ready to let it see everything. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane leveled off above the clouds. Flight attendants wheeled carts down the narrow aisles, offering drinks and pretzels. The smell of coffee mingled with the faint tang of reheated meals. Marcus Grant sat motionless in 27B, hands folded neatly in his lap. On the surface, he looked like any weary business traveler enduring another cramped cross-country flight. But beneath the calm, something deliberate stirred. The message he had sent before takeoff, Activate Hale Protocol, had already set events in motion far beyond the walls of this plane. To Marcus, Hale Protocol was more than a phrase. It was a contingency plan his company had designed for moments exactly like this when a partner airport, airline, or contractor crossed the line into discrimination. It meant lawyers on standby, public relations teams briefed, and investigators ready to comb through contracts and federal compliance requirements. It meant accountability, but here, in row 27, no one knew. Not the passengers shuffling for elbow space, not the crew pouring Diet Coke into plastic cups, not even Olivia Reed, seated a few rows back, her laptop glowing in the darkened cabin. Olivia was busy watching the numbers climb. Her first video had been uploaded only an hour ago, yet it had already surpassed 50,000 views. The comments came from every corner: outrage, sympathy, disbelief. Some viewers tagged news outlets, others demanded the man's name. Who is he? The question repeated again and again. She glanced toward Marcus. From where she sat, she could only see his profile, calm and still, as though nothing unusual had happened. Olivia knew better. She sensed the restraint, the tension of a man carrying far more than the rest of the plane could see. In first class, Richard Coleman signaled for another refill, laughing too loudly at a story he was telling a flight attendant. His voice carried back faintly through the curtain. Marcus heard it, but didn't react. He had no need. Richard's champagne glass was a hollow victory. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved a small notebook. The pages were lined with his own neat handwriting. He began jotting down observations: the legroom measurement, the angle of the seat recline, the responsiveness of the crew. He wrote not as a victim, but as a professional gathering data. The elderly woman beside him peeked curiously. "You work in design?" she asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "In a way, I monitor service standards." It was the truth, though not the whole truth. The standards he monitored determined the experience of millions of passengers each year. The woman nodded and returned to her knitting. The rhythmic click of her needles matched the steady beat of Marcus's thoughts. Hold your patience. Let them underestimate you. Every detail they dismiss becomes evidence. Every slight becomes part of the record. At the back of the cabin, a group of young travelers scrolled through their phones. One of them exclaimed, "Hey, look at this video. Some guy got downgraded from first class for no reason." Another leaned over. "Whoa, that's this flight. Isn't it same gate? Look at the suit." The first nodded, whispering now, "That's him. That guy right there." They glanced toward Marcus, who didn't acknowledge them. The whispers traveled like static, quiet but persistent. Recognition was spreading even at 30,000 feet. Meanwhile, Olivia refreshed her feed. Her video was now trending, picked up by influencers who framed it as a clear example of profiling. The phrase "first class," while black, appeared in multiple hashtags. News outlets were beginning to call. She felt the electric current of a story breaking wide open. Marcus closed his notebook and slid it back into his pocket. He folded his hands again, staring at the seat back in front of him. His breathing was steady, his expression unchanged. Inside, though, his thoughts sharpened into clarity. They think they've humiliated me. They think I've accepted it. But what they don't know is that humiliation can be fuel. They don't see that this is the spark of something larger. He shifted slightly in his seat, glancing toward the window. The sky outside was a deep velvet, the horizon painted with streaks of fading light. He watched in silence, drawing strength from the vastness. The college student next to him pulled off his headphones for a moment. "Man, this flight feels long already," he muttered. Marcus gave a faint smile. "Sometimes the longest journeys happen inside us." The student blinked, unsure what to make of the remark, then shrugged and returned to his music. Marcus leaned back once more, his eyes half closed. The humiliation of Gate 47 still pressed on him, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like direction, like momentum. Somewhere far below, Phones buzzed with outrage. Strangers typed his defense, and systems he had quietly put in place began to stir. In row 27B, Marcus Grant looked like any other passenger enduring economy, but inside, he was already planning the storm. The descent into New York was smooth, but the air inside Marcus's chest felt heavier with every mile closer to the ground. Out the window, the sprawl of the city glimmered beneath the dusk, rivers reflecting streaks of orange light. The skyline looked as it always did, tall, confident, unmoved, but Marcus knew that tonight, the story of this city's busiest airport was about to change. The landing gear clunked into place. Flight attendants secured carts and asked passengers to fasten seatbelts. In first class, Richard Coleman finished his third glass of champagne with the smug satisfaction of a man who believed the world still bent in his favor. Behind the curtain, in economy. Row 27, Marcus Grant kept his hands folded, his demeanor as calm as when the ordeal began. Phones buzzed around the cabin as passengers switched off airplane mode. Olivia Reed was one of the first to check. Her video had exploded now at nearly 250,000 views. She scanned the comments, wide-eyed. Hashtags were trending nationally. Journalists had tagged her handle. A message flashed across her screen from a colleague. Who is he? Find out. This is huge. She looked again at Marcus, noting how he gathered his notebook and jacket without hurry. The quiet power in his composure unsettled her. She sensed he wasn't just another businessman wronged by bias. There was more here, something deeper. The plane rolled to the gate. Seatbelts clicked open. Overhead, bins creaked. Passengers jostled for bags. Marcus remained seated, letting the crowd shuffle past. The college student who'd sat next to him gave a small nod of respect before disappearing into the aisle. When Marcus finally stood, his shoulders seemed taller, his posture deliberate. He pulled his carry-on from the overhead, a simple black roller bag, and joined the line toward the exit. As he stepped into the jet bridge, he inhaled deeply. The stale recycled air gave way to the cool scent of the terminal. He was back on the ground where it had all started, but tonight he wasn't returning as a passenger. Olivia followed at a distance, phone in hand. She hesitated, her journalist instinct warring with her respect for his privacy. Then, almost by accident, she caught a glimpse of a text lighting up Marcus's phone screen as he checked it. The words made her pulse jump. Board meeting confirmed. Press conference ready. Full media attendance. By the time Marcus reached the baggage claim, a familiar figure was waiting. David Chen, his chief legal counsel, stood near the carousel with a briefcase. He greeted Marcus with a firm nod, his expression grave. "Mr. Grant," Chen said quietly. "We're set. The ballroom at the Marriott. Tomorrow. Every major outlet has confirmed attendance." Marcus adjusted the handle of his suitcase. "Good. Let's make sure the facts speak louder than emotions. We're not here to vent anger. We're here to set a standard." Olivia, keeping her distance, felt her chest tighten. "Mr. Grant." She quickly searched her phone, and then she froze. The name Marcus Grant pulled up articles, profiles, stock photos. CEO of Meridian Air, billionaire investor, industry reformer. The man she had just filmed being humiliated at JFK was one of the most powerful figures in aviation. Her breath caught. She whispered to herself, "Oh my God." They had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, in his hotel suite overlooking Times Square, Marcus sat at a long desk scattered with documents, federal aviation regulations, diversity compliance clauses, Meridian Air's contracts with JFK all spread before him. He worked silently, occasionally sipping water, his focus steady. Chen paced nearby. "We could settle this quietly. Marcus, file complaints, request retraining.
We'd have a tidy resolution within weeks. Marcus shook his head slowly. And 6 months from now, another black passenger in a suit will be stopped at a gate. Another family will be forced aside. Another humiliation swept under the rug. No, David, this isn't about me. It's about them, the ones without lawyers, without titles, without leverage. Chen exhaled. He had seen Marcus in negotiation rooms with governments and CEOs, always calm, always calculating, but tonight there was something else in his voice, not just strategy, something rawer, something earned through decades of silent endurance. Meanwhile, at JFK, Supervisor Stephen Brooks and gate agent Lauren Mitchell sat in a cramped office with their manager, Tom Richardson. The viral video now had over 500,000 views. News anchors were calling the incident racial profiling. Richardson's voice was sharp with fatigue. "You two put this entire operation under fire. The FAA called me personally. We're on the edge of a federal investigation." Brooks folded his arms. "We followed protocol. Suspicious ticket. Suspicious passenger." Richardson slammed a folder shut. Suspicious. His ticket was valid, his payment cleared. The only thing you flagged was the color of his skin. And now, tomorrow, he's holding a press conference that every outlet in the country will cover. Lauren swallowed hard, her voice thin. "A press conference about us." Richardson's eyes were cold. "Not about you, about the system. But you'll be the faces of it." Across town, Olivia Reed sat in a quiet diner with her laptop open, piecing together her article. She stared at Marcus's name on the screen, trying to reconcile the dignified man in row 27 with the towering CEO described in every headline. The power of the story overwhelmed her. She whispered, "They treated him like nothing." But he might be the one to change everything. The next afternoon, the Marriott's grand ballroom was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, microphones clustered at the podium, reporters filled every seat, murmurs rippling like a tide. Olivia squeezed into the press row, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to live stream. The room fell silent when Marcus Grant entered. He wore the same Navy suit from the flight, a deliberate reminder. He stepped to the podium, flanked by David Chen and Patricia Williams, his head of communications. He adjusted the microphone, scanned the room, and spoke. "Good afternoon. My name is Marcus Grant. I am the CEO of Meridian Air. Yesterday morning, at JFK Airport, I was racially profiled while attempting to board a flight I had every right to take." The room erupted camera flashes, shouts, scribbling pens. Marcus raised his hand for silence. His voice was calm, measured, but each word landed like stone. "I will tell you exactly what happened, and then I will tell you what we are going to do about it." For 20 minutes, Marcus recounted the humiliation with the precision of a case study, the unnecessary delays, the dismissive tone, the double standard compared to Richard Coleman. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His restraint gave the words more power than outrage ever could. When he finished, the room was still. The silence was almost reverent. Then a reporter asked, "Mr. Grant, what do you want from JFK?" Marcus looked directly into the cameras. Accountability? Transparency? Systemic change. This isn't about punishing two employees, it's about confronting the biases that make this behavior seem acceptable. If our partner airports cannot uphold dignity for all passengers, we will reconsider our partnerships. The threat was calm, but unmistakable. Millions of dollars were at stake. Every official watching understood. As he stepped back from the podium, Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. She realized she had just witnessed a moment that would ripple far beyond an airport terminal. This was the beginning of something much larger.
The morning after Marcus Grant's press conference, dawn broke over JFK Airport with a kind of uneasy quiet. Terminal 4 usually buzzed with the routine chaos of early flights rolling suitcases, coffee lines, tired families. But today, the energy felt different. A row of news vans lined the curb, reporters clustered near entrances, cameras already rolling. The story had grown overnight, spreading across networks and social media until it was impossible to ignore. Inside, Lauren Mitchell tried to keep her head down as she walked through the employee entrance. But she felt the stares. Colleagues whispered in clusters. Some looked at her with pity, others with disdain. Her badge beeped at the security gate, but the guard didn't meet her eyes. She tugged her blazer tighter, wishing she could vanish. Upstairs, Supervisor Stephen Brooks was already waiting outside Director Tom Richardson's office. His usually confident posture was sagging, his tie loose. He muttered under his breath when he saw Lauren, "Brace yourself. This is going to be bad." They were summoned in without ceremony. The office was crowded. Richardson, 2 lawyers, and an HR representative. On the screen behind them, the press conference replayed in sharp detail. Marcus standing tall at the podium, his voice steady, his words damning. Richardson's tone was clipped. "Sit down. We don't have much time." Lauren perched on the edge of her chair, her hands twisting together. Brooks leaned back, trying for nonchalance, but his knee bounced nervously. Richardson tapped the screen, freezing the video on Marcus's face. This man isn't just another passenger. He's Marcus Grant, CEO of Meridian Air, one of our largest partners. And he's made it clear he considers what happened yesterday racial profiling. Brooks opened his mouth. "With respect, we followed protocol. There were system irregularities." "Stop." Richardson cut him off. "We checked the system. There were no irregularities. His ticket was valid. Payment cleared. You had no basis? None. And now the FAA is involved. Congressional committees are calling, and every news outlet in the country is running the story." The HR representative slid 2 folders across the desk. Lauren stared at them, dread pooling in her stomach. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. Termination paperwork. Lauren's voice trembled. "Please, I thought I was doing my job." I never meant. Richardson's eyes softened slightly, but his words were firm. "Intent doesn't erase impact. You humiliated a passenger who had every right to his seat, and you did it on camera. Millions have seen it. There's no undoing that." Brooks leaned forward, red creeping up his neck. "So what? We're the scapegoats. We get thrown under the bus because he's a billionaire with a PR team. What about loyalty? 15 years I've worked here. 15 years of complaints." One of the lawyers interrupted. "We've reviewed your record. Stephen, there are patterns. Incidents swept under the rug because no one pushed back. Until now." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Lauren bit her lip hard, fighting back tears. She thought of her mortgage, her younger brother's college tuition she'd been helping with. In one decision, one assumption, everything had unraveled. Meanwhile, across the city. Olivia Reed sat in a crowded newsroom. Her live stream had changed her career. Overnight offers from major outlets were filling her inbox. But she wasn't celebrating. She replayed the footage again, watching Marcus stand silently as Lauren and Brooks questioned him. What haunted her wasn't just their words, but his restraint, the way he had borne the insult with a dignity they didn't deserve. Her editor leaned over her desk. "Olivia, they're calling it the Grant incident. You're on every channel. This is your moment. I want a follow-up piece by tonight. Angle it as systemic, not just personal. Think bigger." She nodded slowly. Systemic. Yes, that was the heart of it.
Not just Marcus Grant, but every anonymous traveler who lacked his platform. Back at JFK, the fallout accelerated. Reporters swarmed the terminal, interviewing passengers, capturing sound bites from employees who dared speak. By noon, JFK discrimination had passed 1 million mentions online. Lawmakers tweeted demands for answers. Civil rights groups announced they would hold a rally outside the airport. In the employee cafeteria, whispers filled the air. Some defended Lauren and Brooks. Others shook their heads, saying they'd always known something like this would happen. One young agent muttered, "I checked in Richard Coleman yesterday. He walked through without so much as a glance." Same flight. Same time. Tell me that's not bias. Richardson held another closed-door meeting with senior staff. "We are in crisis management mode," he said. "Effective immediately. All employees will undergo mandatory anti-bias training. We're cooperating with the FAA investigation. And let me be clear, if any of you think this is about protecting reputations, you're wrong. This is about survival. Our contract with Meridian is on the line." Across town. Marcus watched the coverage from his hotel suite. He saw the clips of Lauren hurrying past cameras, Brooks shouting at reporters to get out of my face. He saw commentators debating whether this was an isolated mistake or evidence of systemic rot. David Chen set a folder on the table. "Here are the latest updates. FAA wants a full statement within 48 hours. Congress has scheduled hearings next week." And Richardson called twice, asking if you'd be willing to meet. Marcus didn't look up from the television. No private meetings. Not yet. Let the public see the process. Let the truth breathe. Chen studied him. "You understand, Marcus, this isn't just about JFK anymore. Other airports are watching. Other airlines too. You've started something that won't stop at the terminal." Marcus finally turned, his eyes sharp. "Good. That's the point. I didn't spend decades building an airline just to watch the same injustices persist in silence. If it takes my name, my face, my story, then so be it." He rose, walked to the window, and gazed at the skyline glittering under the autumn sun. "But this time, we won't let the system sweep it away. This time, they'll have to answer." The city moved restlessly below, unaware that in boardrooms and terminals, fault lines were shifting. The humiliation of one man had cracked open a conversation the industry had long avoided. And tomorrow, the cracks would widen. The black sedan rolled to a slow stop at the curb outside JFK's Terminal 4. It was barely past 9:00 May. But the sidewalks were already lined with protesters holding signs, "Dignity is not optional. Stop profiling. Justice for all travelers." Their chants rose in waves, echoing off the glass facade of the terminal. News crews lined the edges, cameras poised, microphones extended. When the back door opened and Marcus Grant stepped out, the crowd erupted. Some shouted his name, others simply clapped, their voices carrying gratitude he hadn't expected to hear. For a moment, he paused, drawing a long breath. The weight of the eyes on him was heavy, but not unwelcome. He had spent decades in boardrooms where his presence was questioned, his legitimacy challenged. Here, on this concrete sidewalk, the support felt both unfamiliar and grounding. David Chen emerged beside him, adjusting his glasses. "We should go in quickly," he murmured. "Media will swarm." Marcus nodded, but he didn't hurry. He walked deliberately, his posture calm, acknowledging the crowd with small nods. When a young woman near the barricade shouted, "Thank you for standing up for us," he caught her gaze and simply replied, "For all of us." Inside, the terminal buzzed with tension. Security had been heightened. Officers lined the corridors, guiding traffic. Reporters jostled for position as Marcus entered, cameras flashing in rapid bursts. A few passengers paused mid-check-in, whispering, pointing. Tom Richardson, the duty manager, met him just past the checkpoint. His handshake was stiff, his smile strained. "Mr. Grant, Welcome back. We prepared a secure room for your review." Marcus studied him for a beat too long. "We're not here to stay behind closed doors. Mr. Richardson, we'll need access to the gate. I want to see exactly how procedures are carried out." Richardson blinked, unused to being overruled in his own domain. He swallowed and nodded. "Of course. Right this way." They walked down the concourse toward Gate 23, the very place where Marcus had been stopped 2 days earlier. Each step was a strange collision of memory and present. He remembered the way Lauren Mitchell had turned his boarding pass over, searching for flaws that weren't there. The way Stephen Brooks had dismissed his calm answers with smirking authority. The weight of being told, once again, that he didn't belong. Now, as he approached, the gate looked the same digital screen, glowing, line dividers set up, passengers milling with luggage. But the air felt different. The employees knew who he was, and so did the world. Olivia Reed stood nearby, camera crew in tow. She caught Marcus's eye and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. He returned it. There was no need for words. She had started this ripple with her live stream. Now they were both standing in the storm it created. Richardson gestured to 2 replacement gate agents. "This is Sarah Patel and James Lewis. They'll walk you through the current boarding process." Marcus's voice was steady. "Before we begin, I want to see the system logs from that morning. Every keystroke, every entry." Chen placed a laptop on the counter, already pulling up files. As data scrolled across the screen, Marcus leaned in, eyes sharp. No irregularities. As I expected, the flag was manual. Richardson's face tightened. "It appears so, which means," Marcus said softly, "the irregularity wasn't in the system. It was in the judgment of the employees." There was no anger in his tone, only certainty, but the words landed with the force of a gavel. The bystanders nearby shifted uncomfortably. Even passengers waiting to board paused, sensing history in the making. At that moment, Stephen Brooks arrived, escorted by an HR officer. His jaw was set, his eyes darting between Marcus and the cameras. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "I'm being paraded like a criminal for doing my job." The HR officer kept a hand on his arm. "Mr. Brooks, please." Marcus turned, his gaze level. "Mr. Brooks, I asked you simple questions that morning. You dismissed me, not because of protocol, but because of perception. Tell me." His voice dropped lower. "More intimate, how many passengers who looked like Richard Coleman were ever asked to step aside?" Brooks opened his mouth, but no answer came. His face flushed. Cameras clicked. The silence stretched until Marcus spoke again, addressing not Brooks, but everyone within earshot. "This isn't about me. It's about every traveler who walks through this gate and deserves respect. If my experience can reveal a system that chooses suspicion over dignity, then it is my duty to expose it." Olivia's camera captured every word. The live stream surged with comments. Chills. He's speaking for all of us. History in the making. Richardson cleared his throat, clearly unsettled. "Mr. Grant, we'll be implementing new training protocols effective immediately. Diversity officers will be placed at every terminal to monitor compliance." Marcus's reply was measured. Change doesn't start with new titles. It starts with new choices. He glanced at Brooks and then at the young agent standing nervously behind the counter. The choice to treat people as equals, to listen before you assume, to remember that dignity is not negotiable. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Some passengers clapped quietly, almost instinctively. Marcus stepped back from the counter, his expression calm but resolute. "We'll be conducting a full review over the coming weeks. Policies, training, enforcement, and every finding will be made public." If Meridian Air's name is tied to JFK, then it will stand for accountability. With that, he turned toward the exit. Outside, the chants of protesters grew louder, mixing with the buzz of reporters clamoring for statements. But Marcus didn't stop. He walked with the same measured calm he had carried since the ordeal began, an unspoken reminder that power wasn't in raising one's voice, but in refusing to bend. As Olivia lowered her camera, she realized her live stream had just crossed 1 million views. But more than the numbers, it was the comments flooding in that struck her. This gives me hope. Finally, someone with power is speaking truth. This is bigger than one flight. And deep inside, Marcus knew they were right. The story was no longer just about him, or JFK, or a denied boarding pass. It was about a reckoning, one that had only just begun. 3 weeks later, Washington, D.C., buzzed with an electricity reserved for scandal and spectacle. News trucks lined Constitution Avenue, satellite dishes pointed skyward. On the steps of the Capitol, protesters unfurled banners, justice at 30,000 feet. No more profiling. Dignity for every passenger. The ripple Marcus Grant had set in motion had reached the nation's seat of power, and now the country was watching to see if it would break or transform the system. Inside the cavernous hearing room, members of Congress shuffled papers and adjusted microphones. Cameras lined the back wall, red lights blinking. The placard at the witness table read simply, Marcus Grant, CEO, Meridian Air. When Marcus entered, the room hushed. He wore a dark gray suit, his tie understated, his demeanor the same calm he had carried through humiliation, outrage, and revelation. But behind his steady eyes lay weeks of preparation and sleepless nights. He was not here to defend himself. He was here to challenge an industry. Representative Claire Morrison, chair of the Transportation Committee, cleared her throat. Mr. Grant, thank you for appearing today. We've reviewed the viral footage, your press conference, and the subsequent investigation at JFK. Before we proceed, I'd like to ask, why did you choose to make this public instead of handling it through private corporate channels? Marcus folded his hands, his voice measured but resonant. Because silence is complicity. For too long, these incidents have been treated as isolated mistakes, addressed quietly, buried in paperwork. But they are not isolated. They are symptoms of systemic bias. And if this can happen to me, a CEO with resources and visibility, then what happens to the millions without those privileges? What happens to the mother traveling with children? The young student, the elderly man whose accent makes him a target? I chose to speak publicly because the truth belongs to them. A murmur swept through the gallery. Even some lawmakers leaned back, caught off guard by the clarity of his words. Senator Thomas Green, skeptical and bristling, leaned into his microphone. Mr. Grant, are you suggesting that the entire air travel industry is racist? Marcus didn't flinch.
I am suggesting that bias, conscious and unconscious, pervades every corner of this system. Not because people wake up wanting to discriminate, but because structures allow their assumptions to go unchecked. It's not about labeling individuals, it's about acknowledging patterns. And until we admit the patterns exist, we cannot break them. Olivia Reed, seated among the press corps, scribbled furiously. Her live stream had millions of followers now, and her audience was devouring every word. She glanced up at Marcus and felt the same quiet gravity she'd sensed the day she first filmed him at Gate 23. He wasn't performing. He was bearing truth like a burden, steady and unrelenting. The hearing continued with testimonies from civil rights leaders, union representatives, and passengers who had faced profiling. A mother recounted being pulled aside repeatedly because her last name sounded foreign. A veteran described being denied pre-boarding despite walking with a cane. Each story layered the weight higher, pressing lawmakers into a corner where excuses felt thinner and thinner. When Marcus returned for closing remarks, he stood rather than sitting. This is not about punishing a handful of employees. It is about rebuilding trust in the very gateways of our country. Airports are the first impression for millions arriving here. What message do we send when dignity is conditional, when belonging is questioned at the gate? He paused, letting the silence breathe. I urge you to act, not for me, for every traveler who deserves to walk onto a plane with their head high, unchallenged by prejudice. The room erupted in applause, unusual for a congressional hearing. Some lawmakers joined in. Others shifted uncomfortably, aware that the tide was turning against indifference. That evening, headlines blared across every network. Grant calls out systemic bias in air travel. Congress grills airports over discrimination, from humiliation to reform. CEO testimony stuns Capitol. In New York, Lauren Mitchell watched from her small apartment, her termination still raw. She saw Marcus's words replayed again and again. For the first time, she truly faced the gravity of what she had done. It wasn't just a mistake at a gate. It was a wound in a system already bleeding. Tears welled as she whispered, "What if I had just let him through?" Stephen Brooks, by contrast, sat in a lawyer's office with clenched fists. The Department of Transportation had uncovered a string of prior complaints against him, and disbarment from the industry loomed. His anger was volcanic, but even he knew the tide had shifted. There would be no easy return. Back in deep sea. Olivia walked out of the Capitol steps into the evening air, her phone buzzing nonstop. One message stopped her cold. Your coverage has changed everything. Pulitzer is watching. She looked up at the marble columns, glowing gold in the sunset, and whispered to herself, "This is bigger than me." That night, Marcus sat in his hotel suite alone. The city outside glittered, but he stared only at his reflection in the window. For years, he had mastered the art of patience, swallowing indignities in silence. Now, that patience had become power, not by shouting, but by refusing to be diminished. Yet, even as victory felt near, a sliver of unease threaded through his chest. Could policy truly change hearts? Could training undo generations of bias? He didn't know. But he knew one thing: the fight had begun, and he would not walk away now. 3 months later, the echoes of that day at JFK still rippled through the country. What had begun with a single denied boarding pass had blossomed into sweeping reform, touching every corner of the aviation industry. At Meridian Air's headquarters, Marcus Grant stood in the glass-walled conference room overlooking Manhattan. Behind him, a new plaque hung on the wall, etched with words that had become a rallying cry. Dignity isn't negotiable. Respect isn't optional. The reforms, now dubbed the Grant Protocols, had spread faster than anyone expected. Mandatory anti-bias training became federal law for all airport and airline employees. Independent ombudsmen were stationed in terminals to monitor complaints. Anonymous reporting apps were rolled out nationwide, empowering passengers to call out discriminatory practices in real time. It wasn't just policy, it was culture. In terminals across the country, travelers noticed subtle but powerful shifts. Agents greeted passengers with more care. Security checks operated with greater transparency. Supervisors no longer brushed off complaints, but addressed them on the spot. And for the first time in years, trust began to flicker back into the eyes of travelers who had long felt invisible. Yet Marcus knew the work wasn't finished. That morning, he'd walked through JFK quietly, blending in among passengers. He'd watched an older black couple pass through boarding without a second glance, their boarding passes scanned without delay. It was such a simple thing, but the relief on their faces spoke volumes.
It was proof that change was possible. In a quieter part of Queens, Lauren Mitchell sat at a desk in a small shipping office. Her career in aviation was gone. The stigma of the viral video clung to her name, closing doors before she could knock. She had replayed that morning at Gate 23 hundreds of times, wishing she could rewrite her actions. At night, she journaled sometimes apologies she would never send, sometimes reflections on what she had failed to see. She told herself she was learning, even if too late. Stephen Brooks's fate was harsher.
The Department of Transportation barred him permanently from working in any transportation-related field. A man who had once strutted through terminals with unchecked authority now struggled with bitterness in obscurity. But even in his anger, he couldn't escape the truth. His downfall had not been engineered by Marcus Grant. It had been written by his own choices. For Olivia Reed, life had turned upside down. She had moved from freelancer to a full-time correspondent with one of the nation's biggest networks. Her documentary series, Gatekeepers, followed the stories of travelers who had faced discrimination in airports across America. Critics praised her for giving voice to the voiceless. And though the accolades thrilled her, she never forgot the moment it all began, the quiet nod from Marcus as she recorded that first live stream. One evening, she interviewed Marcus in his office. The cameras rolled as she asked, "Do you feel justice has been served?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering. His voice was calm, as always. Justice isn't a destination, it's a direction. We've taken a step, but steps can be undone. What matters is whether we keep moving forward. His words resonated far beyond the interview. Clips circulated online, drawing millions of views. People quoted him in classrooms, workplaces, even churches. Meanwhile, Richard Coleman, the man whose effortless glide into first class had contrasted so starkly with Marcus's humiliation, had undergone his own transformation. He had watched the coverage unfold with growing discomfort. The champagne he had sipped that morning now tasted sour in his memory. Months later, he reached out quietly to civil rights organizations, offering financial support and public advocacy. For the first time in his gilded life, he began to confront the unearned privilege he had carried unquestioned. But the truest measure of legacy wasn't in policies or headlines. It was in the small, almost invisible shifts. A young Latina traveler boarding her first solo flight, welcomed warmly instead of questioned. An immigrant family passing through security without added scrutiny. A college student seeing a poster in an airport terminal that read, "Every passenger deserves dignity." Marcus often thought about those passengers late at night. He kept the boarding pass from Gate 23 framed in his office, a daily reminder of how fragile dignity could be and how powerful it was to defend it. Beneath the frame, he had placed a small brass plaque inscribed with his words to Congress. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is refusing to accept it. At home, surrounded by his family, Marcus allowed himself moments of quiet relief. His teenage daughter had once asked him, "Daddy, why do they look at you different?" Now, she asked, "Daddy, will you come speak at my school about standing up for what's right?" It was a small but profound shift from confusion to pride. On a winter evening, Marcus walked through JFK once more. The terminal glowed with holiday lights. Families gathered with suitcases and gifts. At Gate 23, he paused. The line moved smoothly. Passengers welcomed with warm smiles. A young gate agent glanced up and froze when she recognized him. Nervously, she said, "Mr. Grant." "It's an honor. Thank you for what you've done." Marcus smiled gently. "Just do your job well. Treat people with respect. That's thanks enough." As he turned to leave, he felt something he hadn't expected: peace. Not because the work was finished, but because the fight had meaning, and it had sparked hope. The humiliation he had endured had not been in vain. Outside,
Snowflakes drifted down, softening the harsh edges of the city. Marcus Grant pulled his coat tighter, stepped into the winter night, and walked forward, not as a victim, not just as a CEO, but as a man who had refused to be diminished, and in doing so, helped raise the standard for everyone. This story reminds us that dignity is not a privilege, it is a right. What happened to Marcus Grant was not new, and many of us, in different ways, have felt the sting of being dismissed, overlooked, or made to prove our worth where proof was never required of others. His response teaches us something powerful. Calm does not mean weakness, and silence does not mean surrender. Instead of exploding in anger or retreating in shame, he chose another path to stand firm, to expose injustice with dignity, and to transform humiliation into a platform for change. For older generations who have carried memories of inequality, this story affirms that the fight for respect is ongoing, but also that progress is possible. The lesson is clear when treated unfairly. We can either accept it as the way things have always been, or we can, like Marcus, refuse to accept the unacceptable. Every small act of courage, whether speaking up, supporting someone else, or demanding fairness, moves the world closer to justice. Thank you for staying with us through this story. If it touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of dignity, courage, and hope to light. Together, we can keep the conversation alive.